Welcome to Music in Mind with Anthony Caulkins. Hey, today I'm going to be talking about some of my thoughts regarding the growing field of interactive technologies in music and some of the experimentations in artificial intelligence in music making and various systems for humans and computers to interact with one another. So to begin, I want to discuss what I mean by interactive. Generally, I like to think of an interactive system as one where there is bidirectional expression, meaning that each participant, or both participants if there are two, are giving and receiving information in order to express their own ideas and understand each other. For example, a conversation would be an interactive interaction between two people where each person is listening to the other and reacting to the other in real time in order to express their own ideas while trying to understand the other's ideas. Musical improvisations would be another example of an interactive system. You could even say that the relationship between a composer writing a piece and a performer interpreting a piece has elements of interactivity, and you could also say it has elements of reactivity. Generally, in an interactive system, there is an implication of agency on the part of all of the actors involved. And this contrasts with a reactive system, where one actor is responding to the input of another actor without necessarily giving input in any kind of self-expressive way. Some examples of reactive systems would be things like effects processors, like delay pedals, reverbs. Word processing programs would be reactive. Even some more complicated algorithmic systems that people sometimes describe as interactive, I would tend to describe very often as reactive. For example, I have a piece called Marble, which is for performers and some live electronics and lights, which do all sorts of flashing things based on frequency differentials between performers and things like that, and it's all very colorful. It's still pretty much reactive, even though some people might describe it as interactive. I would not. So to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, here is a short clip of that piece, Marble. So this idea of interactivity is one that I've struggled with for a long time, because part of me wonders what it even means for a computer system to be expressive or interactive in any way, because in some sense you could argue that a computer is just following some kind of process, regardless of how complicated that process is, whether it's a simple math process or it's a complicated algorithm or it's something that involves various levels of pseudo-randomness, various levels of probabilities. You could argue that at all levels a computer is following prescribed processes. However, you could also argue that about human cognition, and ultimately it sort of becomes kind of a Turing test sort of question, because whether or not I'm confused about what it means for a computer to interact with anybody, I'm also confused about what it means for a person to interact with anybody, and if I'm convinced that a computer is interacting, or if a performer is convinced, or if an audience is convinced, how is that any different from an audience being convinced that I'm interacting with them, or that your friend is having an actual conversation with you and not just following some formula in their brain? They might be doing both. So ultimately, it's sort of a Turing test issue, which displays kind of the potency of the idea behind the Turing test. The question then becomes, what is the difference between the perception of interaction and real interaction? And maybe that's a bad question. Maybe it's a question as silly as what is music. It's sort of a question maybe to ponder over a beer, but it's not that useful when exploring. And ultimately, I have no idea what the answer is, but it certainly captures a good deal of my attention. So I'd like to now play a couple of videos. One that is a piece that I wrote a couple of years ago, which is an improvisation between myself and a computer program I wrote that is designed to model interactivity in certain ways, where it listens for some musical gestures and it can capture audio and do various things with it, decide what sorts of gestures to play and when to play them, and the idea is kind of a feedback loop between myself and it, and I think it was somewhat successful, but also a little bit clunky, as a lot of these experiments and programs tend to be. The next is a piece called Lolita by a fellow composer and friend of mine, Richard Savory. And this is a really cool piece because it is a piece composed by a computer composer, designed by Richard Savory. That was Lolita by Richard Savory. So thanks for watching this episode of Music in Mind. If you enjoyed it, please like it, please subscribe, please share, or leave a comment if you have some thoughts on the issues I brought up. And if you like my work, please visit my Patreon page with the link below. Thanks. See you next time.